Hello and welcome to Euranet Plus Press Club debate. The COVID-19 pandemic is far from over, and now this winter countries are starting to talk again about lockdowns, about new restrictions, and also about the limits on COVID-19 passes, or the EU travel pass or pass sanitaire. This document has a lot of names in various European countries, but we all know it, I guess, those of us at least who travel or even go to the restaurant, by something that has a QR code. And I think that's the thing that a lot of the people have learned in this pandemic, what the QR code is. So recently, the European Commission has proposed to limit the validity of this important for many document just to 9 months. And after that, if you want to keep on using it, you're going to have to get a booster shot. So this is the topic of our discussion today, and also the fact that some of the other countries are introducing mandatory vaccination, either for everyone or just for some people who are living there. With me, I have three great journalists to discuss this. It's Danielle Weber from Luxembourgish Public Radio 100.7. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
I have Yanis. I knew I would struggle with this, Yanis. Yanis Palaiologos from Katimerini. It's a Greek newspaper. Hello.
That was pretty good.
And Teresa Kula from the Swedish newspaper Svenska Dagbladet. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So, Danielle, I want to start with you. Luxembourg is a small country, and therefore is very much dependent on people commuting in and out. So the free movement is important for people there. It's important for the economy. It's important for the good functioning of the country, I'd say. So was there any reaction when the European Commission proposed to have a 9 months limit on the COVID travel certificate?
Yes, Artyom, thank you. And you rightly said that this is really an important issue for Luxembourg. Well, maybe I remind you that half of the working population in Luxembourg is commuting every day. So more than 200,000 people coming in and going out of the country, normally daily, on a daily basis. Of course, for the moment, not all of them are doing that because many are staying at home, working from home, but still for a lot of them, it's not possible. Actually, 2/3 of these commuting workers, of these frontaliers, how we call them, cross-border workers, are working in the healthcare sector. So obviously they have to come and go every day. And therefore there's a huge interest for the Luxembourgish government, for the Luxembourgish society in maintaining the freedom of movement. There has been a big fear since the start of the pandemic that this could stop at some point. Luxembourg was lucky, or very much worked on getting exemptions, and got those exemptions from all the neighboring countries that introduced restrictions. I also want to mention that Luxembourg never introduced any restrictions during the whole pandemic so far, except for people coming in from certain countries, flying in, so not on the land route. So now back to your question, how did the government react? Well, for now, there hasn't been a big discussion on that. Health Minister Paulette Lehnert said that Luxembourg would like to stay with a validity of 12 months, which is the case so far, but very much underlined that Luxembourg would like to have a common approach here, which is very important, obviously. And so Luxembourg is more or less in a waiting position right now to get an EU, a common approach on that.
Teresa, now I want to ask you, because Sweden has been doing a different approach all through the pandemics, is this an issue at all in Sweden? Are people actually discussing those things? Are people using those QR codes to go to a restaurant, to go maybe to shopping or to cinema, or is it just for travel when you leave the country?
Well, contrarily to the previous speaker here, we do not have a commuting population. We have only one crossing point to the continent, which is the bridge over from Malmö to Copenhagen, and then we have a very long border with Norway, but most of that is forest, so we have few crossings. So it's the complete opposite of my Luxembourgish colleague situation. Those who are traveling, those who are flying, I don't know if you can see, but I'm right now at the airport here in Brussels. I suppose the airport is going to be a big topic for the Swedes now who want to spend Christmas maybe in a warmer climate. And so, but the COVID passports and the 9-month restrictions, I think, like my newspaper just recently, like less than a month ago, or less than half a month ago maybe, published a guide on how to download the COVID pass. I live in Belgium, just as you know, like you do yourself, and we downloaded that 6 months ago. So it's a brand new thing in Sweden, and it's probably because we do not have a lot of commuters, and you know, it's only when you do your Christmas holiday planning that you start thinking about the passport. I think that the restriction time is important for two reasons. One reason is maybe, you know, the talk about the third shot, the booster, etc. But also because of this growing debate on integrity and physical integrity, but in democracy, that whole kind of bubbling debate that keeps popping up. If the European Commission and the EU member states do not promise to keep this on a temporary basis, and, you know, they give us new, you know, landmarks each time, I think that discussion can go out of hand. I think it maybe will be 9 months, and then another 9 months, and then another 9 months. But the Commission needs to show proof of not wanting to introduce this on a permanent basis. That's what I think.
Yes, it is, and indeed a very important discussion, because so, you know, up until now, people have been said, well, it's going to be get a vaccine and you'll be fine, you'll be free to do whatever. Now it turns out, okay, you may still need to do test. Now then afterwards a third shot, and the Commission is saying that they reserve the right after a while, when there's more scientific evidence, to actually put the validity even on the certificate with a booster shot. So we don't know actually how long that is going to last, and whether people will actually then be required to do a test and test every month. So is that a discussion in Sweden, Teresa?
I have to say, I didn't hear half of your question there, but you were asking on whether people are thinking about that they're going to need constant new shots.
A third and fourth and so on, yes.
Yes, definitely. Oh, of course, definitely. I know that in my own newspaper, we are discussing, you know, whether or not to put the word fiasco in a headline, like would the European countries say that it has been a fiasco, promising citizens everywhere that, you know, just get your shots and you'll be fine and life will go on as usual. And then now we see that that's not the point. We haven't put that word in a headline yet, because I think I think I can say, without being too personal, I think it's a general point of view that nobody could ever know what this was leading. I mean, how could we possibly know a brand new virus and brand new vaccines? I had no clue. I don't think. Did you think that this would have ended by now? I don't know. Some people are religious and thought this was the end of the world, and some people are, you know, born optimists. I don't know. I think we're all in between somewhere, no?
True, yes. A lot of people thought that it will last just for a few weeks, or never even would reach Europe. We remember the early estimates of the European Commission that we just need to help Italy and then the rest will be fine. Yanis, now let's turn to you, the other side of the European Union, Greece. Obviously very much dependent on tourism, letting in people with the Russian vaccine, also with Chinese vaccine, if I believe, if I'm correct. So what's the debate about this 9 months potential limit? Is this a subject that is being discussed, or people are still primarily concerned with the primary vaccination?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me, Artyom. We have an expression in Greek which roughly translates as there's nothing more permanent than what is temporary. And I think that's interesting with regards to, you know, the constantly shifting goalposts, which are, I agree completely, which are, you know, an outcome of the fact that this is a tremendously rapidly evolving situation. You know, it was impossible to know in April 2020 how it would evolve. There were some extremely naive, optimistic expectations. There were some, you know, extremely dark predictions, and a whole ocean of possibilities in between. The Greek economy is tremendously dependent on tourism. This year, we're actually going to be one of the fastest growing economies in Europe because the tourist season went a lot better than expected. Growth is going to be probably above 7%. That was partly fueled by certain, as you mentioned, liberal, some would say overly liberal policies when it comes to the vaccines. Of course, when it comes to the Russian vaccine, there was criticism from other countries, including Germany early on, and the Greek government actually changed its policy, asked for additional PCR testing from people arriving from Russia with Sputnik. And right now, Greece, of course, was one of the first movers already in January 2021, proposing this idea of an EU COVID certificate, which would allow free travel within Schengen. And now Mr. Mitsotakis, the Greek Prime Minister, has actually sent a letter to Ms. von der Leyen saying that the time limit for the vaccine passport should be limited down to 7 months. As of yesterday in Greece, people over 60 years old whose second dose or primary vaccination was completed more than 7 months ago, if they're above 60 years old and they haven't gotten a booster, for domestic purposes, restaurants, bars, cafes, they are considered to be unvaccinated. And Greece is, the Greek government is willing to accept the EU Commission's proposal for a 9-month time limit. But on the other hand, it's supportive of any measures on a national level. There have been some similar ones in France, for example, which push for people to do the booster shot even earlier. And obviously, when it comes to intra-EU travel, if say a German or a Swedish tourist wants to visit Greece now and they're above 60 years old and more than 7 months have elapsed from their second shot, they'll be able to enter the country, but they won't be able to do anything. So de facto, policies like these make it sort of drag the time limit even sooner. And from the point of view of the Greek government, that's a good thing.
That's a good thing because, I mean, from my perspective, that does create a chaos in Europe because then you don't know, there's 6 months here, 7 months there, 9 months here. And how is the person supposed to know, where they're going to go and what kind of situation they're going to end up?
It's an inherent tension. I completely agree with you. And from an EU perspective, it would be perfect if there was, it looks like there's going to be this agreement when it comes to the EU COVID certificate for the vaccine certificate to take it to 9 months and not 12, but not also 7. But on the other hand, given that countries like Greece and France and others, for domestic purposes, are imposing tighter limits, and of course, it would cause an uproar if they said, okay, a Greek 62-year-old cannot do anything after 7 months, but a German who comes in can do whatever they want. That means that de facto, the German who wants to visit Greece or France will have to also get it sooner. And it does create a level of fragmentation and chaos, but from the point of view of the government that's keen to push it forward, it means that everyone who lives there or visits there will have made the decision to do the booster earlier.
Okay, Teresa, you wanted to come in.
I think the only alternative to prolonging this passport, I think the alternative, like if I were a prime minister or a president and I wanted to show the citizens in my country that I am, I do something, I'm active, I'm preventing, that would be to close borders. And I don't think that anybody wants to close the borders again. We don't want to go back to that patchwork of mishmashy open and closed borders, from one day to the next all around Europe. And I think that the COVID pass is the only compromise that the EU member states can ever agree on. And obviously taking into account what our Greek colleague just said there, that, you can't impose something that is too long. But I think the biggest panic would be if, again, the typical prime minister who wants to win an election, he has to do something, right? So I think the COVID passport is the compromise that they can agree on. I don't know what my colleagues would say, but I suspect that's the issue.
I also agree. Sorry. Thank you, Artyom. I also agree with that. And I to be honest, I think I've never thought it would be possible that the EU would put on the table a common EU COVID certificate that quickly. I was really surprised that they managed to do so. My prediction was it's not possible. And I think it has been a huge surprise and also in a positive way, because people were able to travel more easily because they had this certificate. And I think it's really important that this certificate stays a common certificate and not a fragmented piece of paper or piece of or QR code that is different for every country. So I can accept that some countries want to go further, but being together as a European Union and holding on to free movement, it's of utmost importance that it should be the same for everybody. So I think, of course, Luxembourg is in a very special position, but always what people expect from the European Union is what they live every day. And if I do have to have a test going to a certain country, and I do have to have a booster that's valid for, I don't know, a certain amount of months to go to another, and if I have to check on a list whatever is valid for this or that country, that's not a very positive thing to see the EU, and I think that's what EU citizens expect from the European Union, and rightly so, I think.
This is also
can I add
yeah,
something?
Go ahead.
There's this discussion on the COVID passes that comes from a little bit, I'd say, paranoia camps where, like, there's going to be so much on that idea. They're going to trace it's going to start with vaccines, and then they're going to put all kinds of information into that phone QR code, and it's going to be something horrible to be. Jesus, we're all on Facebook and Instagram already. I mean, we already are electronically tagged, and we've done it voluntarily. So, I mean, if I were to, again, maybe I shouldn't be talking from a personal point of view and more from a professional point of view, but me personally, yeah, I know that if the big bad forces of the world wanted to follow me, they could just check my online, accounts. So I think this COVID pass is. I agree with Daniela. It's incredible that they put it together so fast, and it's incredible how well planned it is. At least I have the Belgian one, and I get my booster shot, and within 30 minutes it was already registered. On my phone. So I find the piece of technology is very useful, and again, everybody follows where I am all the time. The police, the big bad villains can follow me anyway. So, yeah.
It's interesting. Just a small remark before I give you a word, Yanis, that, for instance, people in Russia are very much protesting against similar QR codes, and they're saying something that I have not heard, at least in Europe. They're saying the QR codes are for the product, and we're people, not goods, that needs to be scanned in a supermarket. So this is one of the things that you sometimes hear from the various arguments. Yanis, let's also talk about this, but I also wanted to touch upon this idea of potentially mandatory vaccination, and something that Greek government has introduced, and this is the mandatory vaccination, or you have to face a fine of €100 per month for people over 60. Could you say some words about that as well, please?
Yes, just a quick point following on the remarks of my two colleagues. I also think that the EU COVID certificate was an unexpected success. I think right now we're in a very difficult juncture where we have the new variant Omicron, often mispronounced, around the world, and there's a lot of panic because it spreads so easily. So we are seeing certain governments either going for pushing earlier boosters or imposing tests and so on. But I think there is a willingness as much as possible to keep it together, keep it coordinated. And as the situation becomes more clear as regards Omicron, it may turn out to be tremendously transmissible, but actually milder. That's the hope, at least. I think, if the dust settles there, it'll be easier to coordinate. Now, on mandatory vaccination, yes, Greece is the second country, if I'm not mistaken, in the EU to impose it on the general population from a certain age upwards, age 60 upwards. I think Austria has imposed it on everyone from the age of 14 upwards as of February 1st. We've gone for 60 years plus because we have a relatively large cohort. Until a couple of weeks ago, when the measure was imposed, it was about 17% of people over 60 who hadn't had any vaccination at all. And they are the ones who are sort of filling up the ICUs. So as you said, it's been made mandatory as of January 16th. Anyone who hasn't had a first shot will have to pay a monthly fine of 100 euros. It was obviously controversial. The Prime Minister himself said that he had been against the idea for a long time based on liberal principles. But of course, the decision to vaccinate yourself, especially if you're in an age group which is especially vulnerable, is not only about your own freedom, but affects society at large, because these are the people, as I said, who are bringing about most of the difficulties for the health system. It has led to some reaction, but it's been mostly muted, because I think in Greece we are again in panic mode, as we were in the beginning of the pandemic, and actually that worked very well for us back in the spring of 2020, because everyone stayed at home, and actually Greece had a mostly painless first wave. So now people are really keen to get their boosters. We're having I think it's about 80,000 boosters a day, which is quite a lot for a country of 10 million. And there have been voices saying that it's unconstitutional, and some sporadic protests, but not that much really.
Teresa, I know you need to go soon. So last remark, would that even be possible, a mandatory vaccination for some groups or the whole society in Sweden?
I don't think so. And to be honest, I think that the leaders now have to be very, very careful with wording, because mandatory vaccination can, sound suspiciously like forceful vaccination. And I think that it only takes one situation where you have, I don't know, security guards holding a person and needles being forced into an arm, and then you have lost every single election for the next 20 years. I don't think it is actually possible to impose mandatory vaccination again. It takes one person has an iPhone and films a situation that is, questionable or looks questionable or can be interpreted as forceful, then they're gone. I don't think that any leader is going to propose mandatory vaccines in that way.
I'll just mention that, of course, mandatory vaccination is about fines, and no one's going to hold people down and stick needles into them.
Exactly, you get a fine. I know, but it sounds like it. You can use the argument. I mean, if in the hands of the opponents, you can use the argument. Obviously, look at the EU leaders. They are now saying we should be mandatory vaccinated. And then you put up a poster of security guards holding a poor baby being stuck with needles. You've lost every election after that.
But it would be fake news if you did.
Yes, I agree.
And people believe fake news. I'm sorry. I mean,
I know.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you, Teresa. We're gonna wrap up, but I still wanted to ask this
Thank
basic
you for having
question. Thank you. And Danielle, I want to ask you, what about the mandatory vaccination? Ursula von der Leyen famously came up with this idea that we need to start talking about it. Was there any reaction in Luxembourg?
Well, it wasn't. The reaction wasn't about Ursula von der Leyen's what she said, but obviously the government is discussing this. It was a no-go for the Luxembourgish government. We have a liberal prime minister who always said freedom of the individual is a very important. So they don't want to go there, but the pressure is getting more and more. And of course, the situation in the healthcare system, in the hospitals, people are tired, and people coming in Luxembourg, we still have little less than 1/3 of the population that's not vaccinated. They didn't count on that. I mean, they didn't predict that. They thought 95% are going to be vaccinated very quickly. This wasn't the case. So now they are very much under pressure, and they are starting to discuss about it. And I don't see it the way my Swedish colleague saw it, because I think if you are arguing this way, you cannot do anything, because people using fake news to prove the opposite, they always going to do that. But I think a fine imposed to people not getting vaccinated is getting more and more a thing to consider, because we have to think of the other side of the medal, which are the people working in the healthcare system. And this is really, they are on their limits, and something has to be done. And obviously people not vaccinated are getting the virus is much more powerful on them, and the chance to end up in the hospital is much higher. So that's a point, and I'm not sure Luxembourg. I think the government will try not to go there until the very last second. They have to, but the pressure is there, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do it.
Yanis, last words on this, on the potential mandatory vaccination for everyone. Would that be an idea that Greek society could support?
Well, I mean, the way in which the government reached a decision for the people over 60 was sort of a last resort, because we do have, I mean, the level of full vaccination, meaning 2 doses or 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson, is still only at 63%. And it was the problematic numbers for the older people which led to the decision. The government has left open the possibility of extending the age limit downwards if that proves necessary. But I think, you know, also to link it up to the previous discussion, you know, there has been criticism of the government, and I would agree with that criticism, that they delayed making life harder for the unvaccinated in terms of, you know, preventing them from all sorts of activities or using now this measure of mandatory vaccination because they were afraid of the kind of reaction and of the fake news and the conspiracy theorizing. And I think that had a real cost and was a mistake.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for participating in this press club debate. I think we had a very interesting conversation, lively one for sure. And see you next time.
See you.
See you.